And whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co. Well, today saw the King's speech outlining the new Labour government's priorities for the parliamentary term ahead. So let's look at all that, shall we? And I'll ask you, do you like what you see? Was anything missing? Or was there anything in there that you feel perhaps shouldn't have been? And are you like Sir Keir Starmer tonight, feeling optimistic that a new era has begun? Ben Habib and Aaron Bastani will be keeping me company to get stuck into all of that. But first, let's grab tonight's 6 o'clock news headlines.
Michelle, thank you and good evening to you. Well, MPs have been discussing the King's speech in the House of Commons today. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, promised national renewal after what he called 14 years of Tory chaos. And it comes after King Charles officially opened the new session of Parliament, setting out the government's planned programme of new laws. In total, 40 pieces of legislation were announced, with promises to get Britain building, deliver greater devolution and enhance employment rights. The speech also proposed a football regulator, House of Lords reform and a plan to tackle organised immigration crime. Sir Keir saying his government will solve problems, not exploit them.
The last King's speech was the day when the veil of his choices slipped. And we all saw a party, his party, content to let our country's problems fester, content to push aside the national interest, as they focused almost entirely on trying to save their own skins. But I defy anyone on those benches or elsewhere to look at the ambition and purpose of our intent and not to receive a return to the serious business of government. No more wedge issues, no more gimmicks, no more party political strategy masquerading as policy.
The Prime Minister speaking there. Well, Conservative leader Rishi Sunak, now the leader of the opposition, vowed to hold the government to account on all its promises.
It is right to begin by congratulating the Prime Minister on his decisive victory in the election. He deserves the goodwill of all of us in this House as he takes on the most demanding of jobs in the increasingly uncertain world in which we now live. Now, the party opposite has successfully tapped into the public's desire for change. But they now must deliver change, and we on this side of the House will hold them accountable for delivering on the commitments that they made to the British people. In the national interest, we will not oppose for the sake of it, but when we disagree with the government, it is our responsibility as the opposition to say so.
Rishi Sunak. Well, the latest economic figures show that inflation held at the Bank of England's 2% target last month. All eyes now on whether or not the bank will cut interest rates this summer. The government says the data is welcome news, but prices are still high because of the economic chaos they inherited from the Conservatives. The shadow leader of the House of Commons, though, Chris Philp, accused Labour of shameless spin and suggested the party will introduce what he's calling sneaky tax rises.
This stuff that Rachel Reeves has been saying, claiming that the fiscal position is worse than she expected, is obvious nonsense. The OBR obviously assessed our fiscal position. They published their own forecasts a few months ago that she obviously saw. And we've seen today's inflation figure staying down at 2%, on target, lower than the Eurozone, lower than the USA, growth top of the G7.
Now, it's emerged that a little boy has died at Polmont Young Offenders Institution after the government promised to stop sending under-18s there. 17-year-old Jonathan Beadle died on Saturday. No further details about his death provided. It's understood he was previously in a secure children's unit before being moved to Polmont. In March 2022, the Scottish Government vowed that under-18s would no longer be sent to younger offender institutions. Now, the family of a 9-year-old girl who was shot in East London say she may never walk or talk again. Detectives have released new images of the prime suspect 49 days after the lone gunman on a motorbike opened fire on a restaurant from the road. 3 men sitting outside were hit by the gunfire, but they weren't injured seriously. The 9-year-old remains in a critical condition. And it's feared 2 British men reported missing in Sweden may have been killed. Police have launched a double murder investigation after 2 bodies were found in a burnt-out car in Malmö on Sunday. Local media is reporting they were shot. Local police are still working to identify the victims. Here, a former army general has admitted disgraceful conduct of an indecent kind after being accused of sexual assault. James Roddis pleaded guilty to the lesser charge at Bulford Military Court in Salisbury in Wiltshire. The court was told the complainant indicated she had been content with the count. Roddis was made an MBE and also earned 2 Queen's commendations for his service. He'll be sentenced in September. Prisoners of war have been exchanged following an agreement between Ukraine and Russia. 95 soldiers from each side were returned to their homelands. The Ukrainian men appearing emotional as they left this bus. If you're watching on television, you can see them getting off the coats and shaking hands of those welcoming them. Finally, on home soil, many of them sobbing. President Volodymyr Zelensky says all of the freed prisoners were from the armed forces, and he thanked the UAE, United Arab Emirates, for its part in facilitating the deal. It's the 3rd swap in 7 weeks. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much for that, Polly. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got the former Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Ben Habib, and the co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. Good evening to both of you. You're very welcome tonight, as each and every single one of you are at home too. You know the drill. It's not just about us, it is about you. So what's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me all the usual ways. You can email gbviews@gbnews.com. You can go to the website, gbnews.com/yoursay. I'll be hopping on there in a second to say hello to you. Or, of course, you can tweet or X me. But, of course, it's a big day today. The King's speech. A bold new era, according to Sir Keir Starmer. Without further ado, then, let's cross live to our political editor, Christopher Hope. Good evening to you, Christopher. Anyone that's not been following the twists and turns of the day, bring us up to speed.
Hi, Michelle. Yeah, great to be on your show tonight. Yeah, it's the King's speech. It sets out a 2-year programme for government. Around 40 draft and actual bills will be considered by MPs over the next 2 years or so. The last King's speech, of course, by the Tory party last November. Lots of interesting themes in there. I've counted the words Brexit 6 times back in November's King's speech. This time, 0. No mention of Brexit, but the EU, European Union, was mentioned 15 times. I wonder if that's a kind of idea of where we're going with this government, to get closer to the EU, not further away. We heard, didn't we, from Sir Keir Starmer. He said in his prepared remarks that the snake oil charm of populism may sound seductive, but it drives us into the dead end of further division and greater disappointment. So clearly this is a King's speech designed to reassure and show the country that the government has changed in a kind of steady way. I would argue that if you're a Labour activist, you might wonder if this is it. You've waited 14 years for a Labour government, and it's quite a lack of ambition in many of the measures. The most striking left-wing measures, I'm not sure if Aaron Bastani might agree with this, but the most striking ones probably are the employment rights bill. So anyone signing up to join a company can get immediate access to parental leave and sick pay rather than waiting a few months before you're signed up. I wonder whether that might mean that companies may be reluctant to give full employment rights and be reluctant to hire people in future at the risk of having to pay upfront costs that they weren't expecting. Also, an English devolution bill, further powers for our metro mayors, renationalising the railways gradually. As those franchises come up for grabs, they'll be handed back into state control. Aaron might like that, as I say, and further areas on better buses. Certainly Jeremy Corbyn did. But they have pulled back on some areas. House of Lords reform, they're going to get rid of 80 or so hereditary peers, but not kick out anyone aged over the age of 80, like Alf Dewbs in his 90s, quite a legend in many people's circles. He came over on the kinder transport from Nazi Germany. He can carry on being a peer. So they're pulled back in some areas. Votes at 16, that also is not here. And there's a draft bill which will be controversial. That's to try and that is called the Draft Equality, Race and Disability Bill, forcing companies to say what they pay people of colour, black people, against white people, and also whether able-bodied people are paying more than those who are disabled, in the same way that the gender pay gap is published by big companies. So that's a draft bill. They may not happen for 2 years, but that's the direction of travel. But I just wonder whether where's the actual beef here? If you're a Labour supporter, you've been waiting 14 years, a long time, a generation even, for a Labour government. Is this enough, or is it too safety first for many people? I think we'll see that emerge over the next 5 days of debate about the King's speech, and then, of course, the PMQ's debate between Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak next week.
Thank you very much for that, Christopher Herb. Look, it's very much about you guys at home as well tonight. How do you feel about some of the priorities? Rob, you're not feeling very optimistic. He's been in touch and said there's nothing in Labour's plan that makes me feel anything other than terrified for the future. Really? There's nothing at all that you're happy about? Many people are asking about some of the house building situations there. You might have heard some lines today about it's going to be not about if we build, but how we build, and all of this kind of community involvement about what and where is getting built. Yes, you will get a say, but not perhaps when it comes to vetoes in the way that perhaps people might have been expecting or perhaps have been used to. Another of my viewers says Labour's time in office will be very short based on what we've seen today. So I want some optimism from some of you guys at home. Is there anyone out there that feels good? Because one thing that you can't deny is a new era. Things absolutely are going to change. You got a shout out quite a few times there from Christopher Herb. You are of the left, a Labour supporter. Do you feel optimistic today?
Well, I'm certainly on the left. I'm not always a Labour supporter. I'm a critical friend at times. I thought it was actually quite underwhelming.
Right.
But at the same time, Michelle, you were saying that comment from one of your viewers, he's terrified. If you're very rich and you've been reading for several years about how Labour is going to destroy you, come after you, you'd probably be looking at this and thinking, is that it? So, you know, it works both ways. They don't want to scare the horses, and I think in doing so they've been ultra cautious and they've not done very much. I would also add they've got fewer than 10 million votes. If they'd got 13.5 million votes, I think there would have been a bunch of stuff in there that isn't in there, because they know there isn't a huge mandate.
Like what? So give me one thing that you think, if they got more of the vote share or whatever, what's the big thing that jumps out to you?
I think they'd be more adventurous on something like 16 to 18-year-olds getting the vote. I think you might have seen something like HS2. I think scrapping the welfare, the benefits cap for 2 kids, I think that would have gone. I think you would have had a couple of things like that. It wouldn't have been fundamentally different, but this is the most cautious possible version of the King's speech. And I think if, like I say, things have played out a little bit differently on July the 4th, they'd had a bit more of a mandate from the public, I think they'd be a little bit less risk-averse. Just to be clear, 1 in 5 registered voters voted Labour. So 1 in 3 voters voted Labour on the night, but of course we had a very low turnout. 1 in 5 registered voters voted Labour. And you could take a step back and think, well, actually, that's not a mandate for the kind of changes that the country needs. I personally think that, which is why I support PR.
One of my viewers has also pointed that out and said, Michelle, please, could you remind people that ultimately 80% or thereabouts of the people that are entitled and able to vote didn't actually vote for this government and their priorities? I think you make an interesting point, but of course, Aaron says, quite rightly too, the turnout was very low. So, of course, people that sit there now and say, well, we didn't vote for this. Did you vote for anything at all? Because if you didn't, some would say, you kind of lose your right to complain about it. Anyway, Ben Habib, just the bigger picture, and don't worry, we're going to get into some of these areas as we progress through the show, but face value, top level, your thoughts?
Well, I'm impressed that Aaron thinks it's an underwhelming set of measures and that Christopher Hope similarly said the same. I mean, I'm horrified by them. I have the privilege of being well off, but it's not the taxation side of it that's going to come first. It's going to come all the damage to the economy and to the constitutional structure of this country is what's embedded in this document here. And I mean, just starting at the top, you know, they talk about the need for growth, but every aspect of this document heaps on more regulation for employers, more regulation to make sure we have equal outcomes on ethnic minorities, more regulations in terms of handing over powers to devolved authorities, making it even more complex in the way that this country is governed. And then the creation, the continuance of the hollowing out of our democracies. I say continuance because Blair started it, and the way he did it was to create lots of quangos, give them lots of power, remove political scrutiny from the way the country is governed. And right at the top of the list, there's going to be legislation passed to ensure that the Office of Budget Responsibility gets to sign off effectively on the finance aspects of what government does. There are two aspects to governance. It's the creation of regulations and it's the imposition of taxes. And if you have to get the OBR sign-off, you have actually just stripped away from Parliament and from government one of the biggest levers that they have. So when you vote for Rachel Reeves, if you're mad enough to do that, what you're voting now for is the OBR, not for Labour's policies. So I see this as a stepping stone, the entire project that's described in the King's Speech, as a stepping stone towards greater regulation, less energy security, we haven't touched on that, a further hollowing out of the Constitution and our democratic rights as people. And the next step, in my view, will be much higher taxation, because the damage this will do to the economy, to our ability to get energy cheaply, to operate businesses profitably, will be vast.
I'll bring in another reaction, instant reaction actually to this. So Liz Truss, do you remember Liz Truss? Well, she took to Twitter, or X, with quite, I thought it was quite interesting. I'll get it up on the screen actually and I'll show you it. It was quite a considered and well mocked up graphic, which that was the first thing that caught my eye. And it said Liz Truss in big bold letters. It says Starmer's King's Speech shows that Labour has no idea about the change that Britain needs. Instead, it expands the power of the unelected state and increases red tape on families and businesses. And then it goes on. She says the bad policies include giving more powers to a failed OBR, reintroducing Stalinist housing targets rather than a zoning system. She talks about conversion therapy ban, which will be misused by gender ideologues, and a counterproductive and unconservative smoking ban. The results of these policies will be further economic stagnation and cultural decline.
Well, I agree with her. I think she's got it right. She missed out the the damage to our democracy that this will do. But she started off with that. She hinted at it with the OBR.
But I just thought it was, I mean, maybe I'm making a little bit too much of this, but just the way it was this kind of typed up within a graphic, with this logo and with a big name at the top, I thought, what is that? What are you trying to be? What's your ambition? What's your aspiration? It struck me as just a little bit odd. Why not just write a tweet?
Well, she was the Prime Minister.
For about 44 days, was it?
I thought you were going to say 10 minutes, but it was 44 days.
No, it was about 44 days. I don't know, maybe I was reading something into it. I just saw it and I just thought, what an odd kind of state of affairs we sometimes have. Is this whole ego that surrounds politics.
She can't possibly be going for the leadership of the Conservative Party.
Well, this is what I was thinking. I was just looking at it. I was just thinking, what is it? What is that about? Am I overthinking this?
I think she probably looks at Tony Blair. He's got, you know, his little Tony Blair Institute with several $100 million. And she's thinking,
it's massive.
Yeah, it's the biggest.
For changing the world. The Tony Blair Institute
one in Europe.
For changing the world, no less.
So she's like, well, you know what? I can make up a nice tweet.
Or maybe she's got a lot of time on her hands, enough time to do graphics. What do you think to that? Look, Beth says, Michelle, I am in no way rich by any stretch of the imagination, but I want to say that I am terrified for the next few years too. So listen, you challenge everyone. I want you not just to tell me that you're terrified. I want you to tell me why. What particularly is it that you're seeing that you like or you don't like? One of my viewers on the website says, I really like the notion of stopping the hereditary peerages. Absolutely. Tommy, he's got in touch and and said, Michelle, I am on a 0-hour contract, but it feels to me that I will now be on full-time benefits. See, this is an interesting thing. We'll come on to the workers' rights in just a couple of minutes, actually, because banning a 0-hour contract, Catherine here, she says, why would Labour want to ban these 0-hour contracts? If they work for some people, I don't get it. Where is the choice? And this is a key thing that's coming through from many, many viewers. Some of you, it seems, 0-hour contracts are working for you. Well, that choice is gone. Is that a progressive step or not? So let's get into that, the workers' rights reforms then, after the break. Give me your thoughts. But remember, tell me, don't just tell me you like it or you don't like it or you're petrified about the future. I want details. We've got until 7 o'clock to get into it all, so I'll see you in 2.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Now, time for the best part of the show, our Greatest Britain, where we share amazing people who do amazing things. And this week, that is Dr. Leo Cheng and Reverend Hilary Cheng.
Well, Dr. Chen regularly serves as a volunteer surgeon aboard the Mercy ships in West Africa and has recently served his 17th mission aboard the ships. He volunteers with his wife, Reverend Hilary Cheng, a Methodist minister in the UK.
Thank you for joining us, and what a privilege. So just briefly explain, what are Mercy ships?
Well, Mercy ships provide world-class surgery on the ship, and the ship then sail to these poorest of the poor country because there's no infrastructure to get road or rail there. And we offer free surgery and also education, training of medical staff, and partner with the local or the host nation to build up their surgical and anaesthetic services.
So how long have you been travelling West Africa? You go on all these different ships, different ports, and you treat the needy and the vulnerable. How long have you both been doing this?
20 years.
20 years?
Just over 20 years.
And you take the time to do this out of your own holiday from work. Why do you do it?
Well, because I'm indebted to the education in this country with all the qualification I get. And NHS is great. I love the NHS because without NHS, we see cases that we see in the low-income country. And I want to make use of my hand to help those people who have no way of helping themselves. Because the tumours, the deformities, not just a physical ailment, but it's being ostracised and die early, commit suicide because they've been ostracised by their family.
When you're on the ship, you are seeing the very worst that the country can offer. I find it a great privilege to work alongside these people.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Ben Habib and Aaron Bastani remain alongside me. Now, I'm asking you your feedback tonight on the King's speech and the new priorities for the new Labour government. What do you like, what don't you like, and how do you feel? Are you optimistic, pessimistic? But critically, please tell me why, specifically, what about it that you like or you don't like? Lots of people getting in touch and talking about these new reforms to workers' rights, employment rights. Many people have been suggesting things like the zero-hour contract, that Labour, with an outright ban of that, is the wrong thing to do because it removes the personal choice. There's lots of other things on here about flexible benefits to employees, potentially right from day one, increased unionisation powers and so on and so forth. I've got to say, the Federation of Small Businesses, they've said that small businesses were, I quote, increasingly worried about the proposals driving up costs and risks of giving people jobs. You're a businessman, Ben Habib. Where are you on these?
Well, I completely endorse it. One of the complaints...
You endorse what?
Those views, that actually
right.
what you... Paradoxically, when you seek to protect a particular class of people, in this case workers, and there's another example of this in the King's Speech when it comes to people who want to rent property. But when you put in regulations to protect that class of people, paradoxically what you do is create additional costs of entry, costs of operation. And when you create those extra costs, you tend to deter people, in this case employers, from actually employing people. And when you deter employers from employing people, you obviously create problems within the employment market, the labour market. We've already got a broken labour market with up to around 6 million people claiming universal credit. And by making it more expensive, more difficult for employers to employ people, paradoxically, you're going to get less employment. And one of my complaints about the Brexit deal that Boris Johnson did, I've got many complaints about it, but one of the complaints was that he hitched us at the hip to EU regulations on employment law. So there's a kind of minimum floor below which we can't deregulate. And actually, if we want to get the United Kingdom's economy moving forward, if we want lower taxes, the taxes which Aaron said he was expecting, the tax rises he was expecting to see in here, if we want lower taxes, if we want to avoid higher taxes, what we've got to do is deregulate so that businesses can operate with less friction, less difficulty, and then you have a prosperous economy. And when you have a prosperous economy, wages go up, businesses prosper, and they employ more people. And so this move towards greater regulation actually, in many cases, and I would argue over the last 27 years, has been used relentlessly as a tool that has damaged, UK PLC and just about every business in the United Kingdom.
Neil, one of my viewers on the website, he says these new Labour laws will strangle business and enterprise and thus growth. More growth, most growth, he says, in the economy does come from the small and the medium-sized businesses, not from the large, giant corporates. These SMEs, they can't bear any more costly regulatory burden. Aaron Bastani, where are you on some of these?
Well, the biggest cost for business, which has gone up substantially in the last several years, is, of course, energy. And then on top of that, you're going to have increased costs of credit because of interest rates. So the idea that this is somehow, the major cost that's been imposed on businesses over the last 5 years is inaccurate. What I would say is Britain is very good at creating jobs. It has had very low unemployment for a very long time. We have a major problem, which is more people are in poverty who work than who don't work. We have lots of in-work poverty. We all view that as bad. Mm-hmm. Right? Let's start where we agree.
I disagree with a number of things you've already said, but I'm holding my tongue.
But we agree that in-work poverty is bad.
Yeah, but I disagree that we have low unemployment. We have very high unemployment. It's just that unemployment figures, official unemployment figures, only look at those people who are actively seeking to find a job, which is around 1.5 million. We've got 4.5 million people who aren't even looking for a job.
By the standards... OK, then let's look at employment, not unemployment, employment rates. By the standards of the European Union, Britain is pretty good at creating... Because of the Thatcherite reforms of the 80s and the 90s, it's pretty good at creating new jobs. And generally speaking, you can find a job quite easily. That has some upsides, that has some downsides, but that's just a feature of our economy. The big problem is, at the same time, we have lots of people who are in work who are also poor. If you look at, for instance, child poverty, the majority of kids in poverty have a parent in their household who works. Now, the question is, and again, we'll agree on that's a problem, we should try and resolve it as a country, how do you fix that? Labour's proposal is to change some features of the labour market in terms of changing rights from day one when you enter work. Now, you as a businessman know this. Somebody, when they start their contract, you know this as well, they'll start their contract at work. They're on probation anyway for the first 3 or 6 months.
Yeah,
and that's not changing, Ben. So if somebody starts playing silly buggers, the employer can still get rid of them. The idea that this is a really radical change, and from day one you're lumbered with this awful employee, you can't get rid of them, that simply isn't true.
But you've got to look at the direction of travel. When I started in work, it was 2 years probationary period before you had to have a reason to fire someone. Now it's 12 months. So, but let me tell you, you don't know the character of an individual until you've worked with them for some time. And problems arise and suddenly you're hamstrung. So you're very nervous of employing. We now have to statutorily provide pensions for employees, which we didn't have to do. And the way I addressed that when that statutory thing came in was to tell employees, I'm sorry, you're not getting a salary rise because we're having to do this, we're having to do pension contributions instead. So that you strip away the opportunity for employees to choose how they spend their money. You actually, what you do is you make it a much more rigid, less manoeuvrable, less freewheeling economy. You look at the US, where they have many fewer employment laws than we do, and the economy has grown immeasurably compared to ours. Ours has been stagnant for 20 years, roughly, our economy. The US is growing year in, year out, partly to do with their energy policy as well, partly to do with some other things. But they have a very freewheeling approach to employment, and they have very high levels of employment. And we desperately need to break away from that European model, that socialist model of in the pursuit of the protection of the employee, we kill the employer. It's bad for business.
I just fundamentally disagree. I mean, Ben's a perfectly affable man, but I just fundamentally disagree. I don't think Britain's major issue is that we have too strong protections for employees. You're absolutely right. You might employ a wrong one, and this is something the left has to grasp. Businesses shouldn't be punished for making a bad hiring decision, because ultimately that doesn't help anybody. You want a productive business, you want happy employees. I appreciate all of that. I would simply say what's being proposed here is it's not that big a shift.
I am very nervous of employing people because of the difficulty of getting rid of them.
But that's already on the statute book.
Yeah, and this is going to make it worse.
Well, not really.
Yeah, zero-hours contracts allows some businesses. I'm not a great fan of zero-hours contracts, by the way, but zero-hours contracts does afford those hospitality businesses that have very large peaks and troughs to be able to oscillate in and out of the employment market without any cost. Otherwise, you've got to take a full-time employee on, keep them working 365 days of the year through all the seasons, even when you may not have any custom, and that's bad for business.
Can you just give them a temporary 3-month contract? I mean, that's, you know... Well, there's a via media, there's a middle way here, isn't there?
Well,
you give them a 3-month,
6-month
contract.
What we want, what we desperately need... We've had 27 years of regulatory impositions on the United Kingdom. One of the great benefits of Brexit should have been that we could throw away those regulations that have held us back in this country from the EU, and we haven't done it. And this King's Speech takes us further and further towards that kind of over-regulated, nanny state, state interventionist, controlling, top-down form of economic management, which is so damaging to the Anglo-Saxon way. We've got to get back, as that brilliant texter said. You know, we're a country, 96% of businesses in this country are small and medium-sized enterprises. We need them on their front foot. Lots of regulation suits big corporations because they can navigate the regulations. SMEs can't.
I agree with that entirely.
They haven't got the wherewithal.
I agree with that entirely. What I would say as well, just quickly on Liz Truss, she was highlighting all these awful things: smoking ban, Tory policy; housing targets, Tory policy.
Well, Gove got rid of them, didn't he?
Well, I know, but there was a housing it was meant to be 300, then it was 200. Well, I can't remember. It's always changing. And then, you know, she's saying that giving more powers to the OBR. I agree, by the way, that's bad news. The Tories created the OBR. George Osborne created the OBR in 2010. So,
well, George Osborne was part of the Blair regime, wasn't he?
We can bash the Labour Party in their King's Speech, but look, Liz Truss is criticising the Conservative Party of 2010, of 2019 actually, in some of this, just as much as she's criticising the Labour Party.
And what about, so there'll be things that you do like, sir, the whole principle of fire and rehire. Labour have pledged to do away with that. Do you like that?
Well, ironically, Labour have actually used fire and rehire to get rid of their own staff in the past, but there you are. I think there are...
Well, tell people about that might not be familiar with that.
So Labour got rid of a bunch of employees after Keir Starmer came in, his preferred General Secretary, David Evans, came in. And, of course, like any organisation, you have a change of management. They want to do things their own way. They got rid of a bunch of staff, and then they rehired a bunch of staff. And they effectively got rid of staff on the weakest contractual conditions. Many of those actually weren't particularly robust contracts at all. They weren't congruent with quote-unquote Labour values. So you see lots of you see lots of, let's say, contradictions here rather than double standards.
But I mean, it's a really good example of that. So this is what they're banning is the businesses firing someone on certain terms and conditions, then immediately offering them a job on a lower salary or whatever.
Yeah.
That's being banned. So what that means is they're going to fire those people and they won't rehire them because they're going to have to fire them anyway.
I think, you know what? There'll just be more quote-unquote restructures. There are always, like you said about the major businesses, there will always be ways around this stuff. And I agree with you, by the way. Small businesses are less able to navigate that.
And when you have to find a workaround, there's a cost associated with it. You've got to get an accountant's advice or a liquidator's advice, or you've got to do an insolvency or whatever it is. And all of that is a burden on business. And we've got to take the burden off business. The private sector is on its back foot. We had COVID lockdowns on and off for 3 years, which has decimated our private sector, our hospitality sector. It needs a leg up.
I would say to that quickly, the biggest problem for business, other than rampant energy bills and very expensive...
Which is also a consequence of lockdowns, by the way.
Access to credit, yeah, we agree. Expensive energy is definitely a bad thing. But a major problem, especially for something like hospitality, is there is not enough money in the consumer's back pocket. Now, Labour, again, would say that's precisely why we want to create better working conditions, because my father's a taxi driver. For instance, if more people have more money in their back pocket, it means they can take a taxi once in a while. They can go out for dinner, they can go to a hotel.
Why didn't they reduce tax on the working class? Why didn't they cut?
It's already quite low, to be fair.
No, it's not. The threshold at which tax is paid, 12,500, has been held there for the last 3 years. It's due to be held there until 2028 unless Labour change it. And that has caught millions and millions of people in the tax net. And one of the reasons we've got 6 million people, this is where, I disagree that there aren't many people unemployed. There are many, many millions of people unemployed in this country, is because actually it doesn't pay to work. And part of the problem here, which we haven't discussed, is immigration, the very low-skilled, cheap imported labour, which has undermined wage growth. So there's a multiplicity of issues, but you don't solve it through over-regulating.
Well, let's come on to that issue, because many people are saying how much of a mention did immigration get in this bill? We'll look at that. I also want to talk to you about housing as well. Michael on the website says, Michelle, can I ask a question? How many private sector jobs will Labour create? He says, I just seem to see more public sector jobs in things like OBR, in rail, energy, quangos, etc. He's concerned that would lead to more unionisation, more strikes over pay, and the public held to ransom. Is that a concern that you guys share at home or not? Tell me your thoughts. The conversation continues in 2.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Good evening to you. Tomorrow, fine with sunny spells and a bit warmer than today across most of England and Wales. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, things will be a little different. There's high pressure sitting across England and Wales. Low pressure and weather fronts just eking in from the west, springing cloud and patchy rain at the moment across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. But that rain's going to pep up overnight. It could turn heavy for a time across the west of Northern Ireland and along the west coast of Scotland. A few showers for North Wales maybe, but for most of England, Wales, southern and eastern Scotland, a dry night. Quite a warm night. Temperatures holding up in some towns and cities at 15 or 16 degrees. On to Thursday, and a dull, damp start, certainly for Northern Ireland and western Scotland. But in the south, mostly fine. Could be some morning fog patches around. They may take a couple of hours to clear away, but generally plenty of sunshine across the south. A bit more cloud in West Wales, northwest England, 1 or 2 showers here, and a dull, damp morning for Northern Ireland. And a good part of Scotland seeing cloud and outbreaks of rain. Maybe parts of the east coast escaping largely dry, but even here a few showers may drift up as we go through the morning. So it's a bit of a north-south split with the weather, certainly to start with. I'm hopeful that parts of southern and eastern Scotland will actually turn a bit drier through the morning and stay largely fine. Some brighter skies likely to develop across the Murray coast through the afternoon. Northern Ireland, western Scotland do stay pretty dull and damp. Most of England and Wales seeing plenty of hazy and pretty warm sunshine. 28 in the capital, many places in the mid-20s across the south. By Friday, that heat could build further. We may reach 30 Celsius across the southeast in the sunshine. Again, quite a bit of cloud at times for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but generally a drier day for Northern Ireland. It'll be late in the day before this rain starts to creep in. 1 or 2 showers elsewhere, but most places set fair. As I said, hotter still with maybe 30 Celsius in the southeast.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, my name is Johnny Ratner. Major problems in central London tonight. Regent Street is blocked southbound from Oxford Street outside Oxford Circus Station down to the A4 at Piccadilly. A demonstration underway from Marble Arch and Whitehall via Regent Street and Haymarket. And of course, various closures remain in place near Westminster, including the Mall, Horse Guards and Birdcage Walk and St James Park due to the state opening of Parliament. Long queues on the M20 heading London bound through Kent, 9 to 8 near Ashford. A lorry's broken down in the left lane on that 2-lane stretch. Queues as well in Somerset on the M5 southbound at 21, the Western-super-Mare turn off the left lane's closed where a car has broken down. And on London Underground, where there are severe delays on the Piccadilly line, Acton Town to Hounslow Central, no service Hounslow Central to Heathrow Airport, all down to problems with signals at Hounslow West. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got Ben Habib and Aaron Bastani. Welcome back, everyone. Look, we're unpicking the King's speech tonight and I'm asking you, how do you feel about it? Are you optimistic, pessimistic or what? One of my viewers has got in touch saying, Michelle, leave Liz Truss alone. There was nothing wrong with her response. I consider myself told, I consider myself rats on the hand, and I'll pack it in. Adrian says, please can you tell Ben Habib he would be a great Prime Minister for this country. Vicky says care homes and care workers do 0-hour work. Yeah. What about those people? Well, I've got to say, I think if Labour were here, I think they would say that what they're trying to do is ban what they would call the exploitative 0-hour contracts. So many people are picking up the 0 hours one that you're saying to me that it works for you and you want to keep them. Kayla, you ask a question, say, Michelle, when it comes to child poverty, how is that even determined these days? Is it defined as they don't have a PlayStation, a mobile phone, or is it as they can only have beans on toast for tea? Well, this 2-child benefits cap, this has come under a lot of scrutiny because many people were hoping that it would be in this King's speech and it would be nailed on all the rest of it. It wasn't. And that's caused quite a lot of debate today. Where are you on this? Do you think they should have scrapped it?
I think they should have, yeah. I mean, it's going to cost about £2.5 billion a year. So right now you have this 2-child benefit cap, which means fundamentally if people on universal credit, they can't claim benefits after 2 kids. Now, I've heard so many personal testimonies of a family with, say, 3 kids, the dad's passed away, and all of a sudden the mum is up the proverbial without a paddle. And I just think that's so unfair. We need to incentivise large, healthy, happy families, if that's what people want. And what we're basically saying is, if for whatever reason one of you disappears, somebody might fall sick, they can die, anything can happen, they might leave, there might be family breakup, whatever, all of a sudden the other parent is penalised and those kids are growing up in really, really hard conditions. So for me, as somebody who wants to incentivise families, I think it's a ridiculous policy. You might say, well, £2.5 billion is a lot of money. I actually think hundreds of thousands of kids growing up in poverty is going to cost lots of money in the long term.
So you'd get rid of it? Where are you?
I would absolutely get rid of it.
I'm afraid I would get rid of any support for having children. I mean...
Oh, Ben Habib.
I absolutely would. I think you bring children into this world, you've got to take it incredibly responsibly. It's a voluntary decision. It's not a decision that you're obliged to fulfil.
No, but it's necessary for the economy, though, isn't it? Because if you don't reproduce,
it is, but
what's going to happen?
You don't pay people benefits on the basis of how many children they've got. If you want to bring children...
We're doing the opposite, right? We're discriminating against people for how many kids they've got. That's the problem.
What do you mean?
So with universal credit, you get universal credit, blah, blah, blah. The second you have more than 2 kids involved, you're not getting any
cash. But you get cash based on the first child and the second child.
Yeah.
And I would scrap that. I think you have... If you aren't able to have the confidence in yourselves to look after the children that you wish to bring into this world, then you shouldn't bring children into this world.
So, okay,
it can't be up to the state to step in and mollycoddle you through having made a decision which is entirely your own decision.
Do you think that we do need to incentivise child rearing?
Yeah, but you can do that in many other ways. For example, what you don't do is what Jeremy Hunt did a couple of years ago, which was to reduce the age at which a child has to be in order to provide social care, extra social care payments to a mother. What you want is big, strong family units. And actually what we've done as a nation over the last 70, 80 years is progressively hollow out families, hollow out local communities, hollow out local community infrastructure, which gives succor and results in procreation and, you know, the healthy families and into sort of families that all, you know, work together and support each other. What we've done is the state has sucked everyone into the tax net by incentivizing them to work earlier when they've got, you know, younger and younger children, incentivized mothers against having children, made it almost a kind of a thing of virtue if you don't have children. You know, if mothers who are working, they're somehow given a bigger status in society than mothers who stay at home. You know, if you're a stay-at-home mother, it's like, oh, you're a stay-at-home mother. No, you're providing a fantastic function. What we need to do is give married couples specific tax breaks. We have got to make the economy more vibrant, we've got to grow the economy, we've got to champion the United Kingdom. And if you do all of that kind of stuff, people will procreate anyway. What you don't do is create and embed further the dependency culture, which is so rife already in the country, and saying, well, you can have children, you can do it irresponsibly, and guess what? The state will step in and look after you.
Strong words, Ben Habib. Any response to them, Marvel?
Well, like I say, there are personal testimonies from people where they do work. There are two parents. If one of them dies, I don't understand. We are actively discriminating against large families who fall on misfortune. We have a birth rate in this country of about 1.5 at the moment. In Scotland, it's 1.2. In London, it's 1.34. We are headed for a fertility rate below 1, I think, this decade. There was a report out, I think, from a major bank saying by the end of the 2030s, I think it's sooner.
But that's because we've broken the family unit.
Well, you say that, but look, birth rates are low in Japan, they're low in Russia, they're low in Iran, they're low in India.
Hold on. Some family units need to be broken because there's a heck of a lot of domestic abuse that goes on.
I'm not talking about...
It used to be the case that you really did stay together because you were a family unit, and the wife in that environment was getting, you know, really badly treated. And now...
Well, you know, I'm not advocating that, obviously. You know, obviously, there have got to be protections in place for women who are being abused by their husbands or vice versa. But the principle of a strong family unit that is given, the existence of which is supported by government policies through the taxation regime, for example, is a much better approach than the dependency regime, which is wealth redistribution.
I mean, it's not dependency. I know couples in London earning great money. They have very expensive mortgages, and their childcare a month is £3,000 a month. The idea that, oh... Well,
and why have they got childcare?
Because they're both at work.
Yeah, because they're both at work. This is what I'm saying.
If your mortgage is £3,000 a month, you both have to go to work.
So what you've got to do is have an economy that's doing well, where you can provide the tax incentives for one of the parents to stay at home, the other to work.
That doesn't seem realistic to me.
What?
That doesn't seem realistic. In
Why?
2024...
It worked for centuries.
Well, so you're saying, you know what, let's scrap this. We're going to have half the labour market tomorrow, just men work. I mean, I didn't say that. I'm not saying that.
I didn't say that.
That's the logical endpoint, isn't it?
Oh, I could carry this on all night long, ladies and gents at home. You guys will have really strong opinions on this. I want to hear from you. I'll perhaps touch back on it after the break, but I also want to explore other aspects. Our commitment to Ukraine, that was in the King's Speech. I want to look at, if I've got time, housing. There's so much I want to get through. Come back in 2.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
An employment tribunal has found that a senior lawyer telling a legal secretary that she looked nice created an intimidating environment and made her feel violated.
Well, she's won her sexual harassment suit, so is saying someone looks nice acceptable in the workplace anymore?
Well, joining us now to debate this is political commentator Christine Hamilton, who thinks it should be, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid, who thinks making comments like these are unnecessary. OK, Rebecca, why is it unnecessary to tell your colleague they look nice?
Well, how somebody looks at work shouldn't be particularly important or relevant. But I think my issue here is that it's used as a sort of dismissive way to make women feel silly for complaining about things. Like, oh, it's just saying you look nice. Why does it matter? But we all know there are different ways of saying things. And if you are an older man in a position of power, looking a woman up and down and saying, oh, you look nice, in a lascivious tone, which, as far as we know, is quite possibly what happened, that's not acceptable. That's not workplace appropriate, and it would make somebody feel uncomfortable.
Christine, she's right, Rebecca, isn't she? It depends how it's said. If you've got someone who's sleazy saying, oh, you look nice, you're going to be a bit off-put, aren't you?
Yes, we don't know whether this was said in a lascivious tone or not. And as far as I can see, this particular case, the boss went too far and he did a lot of other things as well. But what worries me is that the tribunal has ruled that just saying you look nice could be included as sexual harassment. Now, I think that is ridiculous.
Realistically, women don't make these accusations for fun. Women don't make these accusations to be difficult. They do it because they've been made to feel unsafe or unable to work in a certain place.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you. Till 7, Ben Habib, Aaron Bastani remain alongside me. Goodness me, this conversation about child rearing, child benefits and so on, I could spend all night on this. Joanne says there's something wrong there, Michelle, when it's lower income families that seem to have the most children and middle income families sit there and plan their family and stop at perhaps 1 or 2 children because they simply can't afford it, she says. Are you saying, Michelle, that the only reason to lift child benefit cap is in case somebody dies? In which case, why won't you just give a bereavement benefit and that would solve the problem? Fred said, what about having child benefit for working families only? But that would defeat the object, Fred, because what Ben's saying is, what about having a parent that can stay at home? The flip side, as Aaron says, is how do you afford to do that in this day and age? Honestly, this conversation could carry on. Mick says it's not just child benefits that need looking into. The whole benefit system needs upheaval. There's far too many people on easily obtainable benefits. Look, I do just want to quickly touch on another point. Keir Starmer, he said he reissued our commitment to Ukraine and said he wants to be a leading role in enabling their NATO membership. Ben Habib.
So I've got a real problem with the way the West has absolutely underwritten President Zelensky. Of course, Russia should not have invaded Ukraine. That's a given. But the blank check that both the United States and the United Kingdom, and indeed many countries in Europe, are prepared to give Zelensky is wrong. We've had far too many foreign interventions, intervening in Afghanistan, for example, in the 1980s, where we armed up the Mujahideen, again, pretty much without any thought of what the consequences might be, and then lived for decades to regret what we did in Afghanistan. We're making the same mistakes in Ukraine. And the biggest criticism I've got of our whole intervention there is that we're not asking ourselves 2 questions. What is our war aim? And our war aim can't be just to do whatever Zelensky wants. And what is in British national interest in being involved in Ukraine? And we're not asking those questions, and it's a problem.
Aaron?
Well, I wanted to talk about, very quickly, the new commissioner for the armed forces that Keir Starmer wants to create.
I loathe that as well. I loathe that.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
We agree on some stuff.
Yeah.
I think we've got far too many commissioners. We need to scrap lots of them. But this was interesting. They're saying we're not recruiting enough people, therefore we need to create this new role. Very quickly, There's Defence Council, Defence Board, People Committee, Defence Management Group, Defence Delivery Group, Chief of Staff Committee, Defence Safety and Environment Committee, and yet none of these people apparently can recruit properly for the MOD, but we're going to hire this one person, and apparently, you know, that's going to be the game changer in terms of recruitment for this organisation with a budget of tens of billions of pounds. It's not serious. It's not serious. And I think this fetish for more quangos, for more bureaucrats, more commissioners is deeply problematic, and we need to move beyond it.
And if the Commission's given too many powers, our armed forces are now going to be not at the behest of our political leaders, but unelected bureaucrats. This is how our democracy is being hollowed out, and this is how the nation is being put in danger. That's why I don't see this as an underwhelming set of proposals. I mean, that's a really good one you picked on, Aaron. This is a deeply worrying set of proposals from Keir Starmer.
Just tell me, before I finish, is there anything you liked?
There was a hint that he would ban conversion therapy.
Right.
I didn't, and I would have to see the bill because it's not in keeping with his belief that 1% of women have a penis. So I need to understand how he's managed to come to terms with his own peculiar set of beliefs.
Oh, ladies and gents, I tell you, we open a whole new can of worms with that one, don't you? Stuart says, I'm optimistic for the future following this speech. And Terry says, I'm optimistic. Let me ask you a simple question. Why would it ever be wrong to give workers more rights? Surely that would create a more productive economy. Were you not paying attention to the first 10 minutes? Watch it on Catch Up. But for now, that's all I've got. Aaron, Ben, thank you for your company. Thank you at home. Up next, Martin Daubney. I'll see you tomorrow. Night-night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Good evening to you. Tomorrow, fine with sunny spells and a bit warmer than today across most of England and Wales. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, things will be a little different. There's high pressure sitting across England and Wales. Low pressure and weather fronts just eking in from the west, bringing cloud and patchy rain at the moment across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. But that rain's going to pep up overnight. It could turn heavy for a time across the west of Northern Ireland and along the west coast of Scotland. A few showers for North Wales maybe, but for most of England, Wales, southern and eastern Scotland, a dry night. Quite a warm night. Temperatures holding up in some towns and cities at 15 or 16 degrees. On to Thursday, and a dull, damp start, certainly for Northern Ireland and western Scotland. But in the south, mostly fine. Could be some morning fog patches around. They may take a couple of hours to clear away, but generally plenty of sunshine across the south. A bit more cloud in West Wales, northwest England, 1 or 2 showers here, and a dull, damp morning for Northern Ireland. And a good part of Scotland seeing cloud and outbreaks of rain. Maybe parts of the east coast escaping largely dry, but even here a few showers may drift up as we go through the morning. So it's a bit of a north-south split with the weather, certainly to start with. I'm hopeful that parts of southern and eastern Scotland will actually turn a bit drier through the morning and stay largely fine. Some brighter skies likely to develop across the Murray coast through the afternoon. Northern Ireland, western Scotland do stay pretty dull and damp. Most of England and Wales seeing plenty of hazy and pretty warm sunshine. 28 in the capital, many places in the mid-20s across the south. By Friday, that heat could build further. We may reach 30 Celsius across the southeast in the sunshine. Again, quite a bit of cloud at times for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but generally a drier day for Northern Ireland. It'll be late in the day before this rain starts to creep in. 1 or 2 showers elsewhere, but most places set fair. As I said, hotter still with maybe 30 Celsius in the southeast.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
In Tyne and Wear, long queues east of Newcastle heading south.